Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration, and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders in the path they took to create change. Past guests include Kevin King, Roland Frazier, and Rick Cesari. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 25 years. So if you're a company that has software, product, or design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have here today James Thomson. James is the go-to expert on all things Amazon. I mean, truly, everyone goes to James when they want to know anything about Amazon and the larger world of Amazon sellers and Amazon FBA. He's been featured in so many media outlets and has been published more than 200 times in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Wired, and the Washington Post. He's also a partner at Buy Box Experts, which is a service agency that helps support brands that sell products online. He also co-founded Prosper Show, which in my opinion is one of the best events out there for larger Amazon sellers. He recently co-authored the book, Controlling Your Brand in the Age of Amazon, which I just bought a copy of today on Kindle. All of this connection to Amazon makes a lot of sense because James used to work at Amazon. He was the business head of Amazon Services, and he was the first Fulfillment by Amazon account manager. So he truly broke ground in terms of the whole Amazon FBA ecosystem. And most importantly, I think most interestingly about James is that he lives in Seattle, but curiously, he doesn't drink coffee.
That is true.
I think we'll have to get to the bottom of that one. And actually, on that subject, I'm curious, is it kind of like living in Vegas, you don't want to gamble? There's just too much of it around, or something else at play with that?
I moved to Seattle, and I already had my adult taste preferences in place. So I'm a tea drinker. Enjoy my tea.
Got it. So Seattle could not change you.
Seattle cannot change me.
That's great.
Thanks for having me on today, Rich.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So there's just so many things that you know about, and there's so many things that I've heard you talk about with regard to Amazon, with regard to selling online. And I think something that might be of great interest to my audience is talking a bit about innovating products and launching brands. And I know branding is something that you care very much about, and there's a big focus of the book that you recently co-authored. So tell me, someone who is looking to launch a product on Amazon or looking to launch a product online, what do they need to know before they get to that phase of actually creating their listing, getting their product up there? Like, what do they have to have their attention on?
There's a lot of components to answering this question properly. Let's start by looking at Amazon as a channel and understanding what brands mean to Amazon. Let's start with, if a brand is a brand name with a trademark, Amazon will recognize your brand as something legitimate, so to speak. But back in the days in the late 2008, 2009 period when I first started at Amazon, there were all sorts of companies getting started in the private label business, and they would show up on Amazon and they wouldn't even have a brand name. And then some of them would have a brand name, but they hadn't actually bothered to go and trademark it. And it very quickly became obvious on Amazon that there was a lot of frustration between companies that did actually have proper trademarks and Amazon dealing with people who were hijacking listings. And so Amazon decided we have to put some protections in place for brands. And in this case, what is the threshold for a brand? It's a company that has a trademark on this brand name. And so if you're a company and you have a brand name and you haven't bothered to trademark it, Amazon is not going to treat you as a full-fledged brand. which means you're not going to be able to protect the content that you have on Amazon, which means someone can come along and modify your listing and turn your product from one type of product into something completely different and potentially even change the brand name. I don't want to get into product hijacking, which is what that whole art of dirty art is all about. But really here, if you want to sell your product and you want to communicate that your product delivers certain features and benefits, you want to be able to invest time in crafting that carefully, put it into your listing, and know that those promises and around the features and benefits, they're not going to change because somebody inadvertently or advertently in the middle of the night came along and changed the content. You want to know that you're putting your product out there and it does X, Y, and Z for customers. Customers sees that it does these things, and they can make a decision as to whether or not your brand makes sense. So when we work with companies that are considering being on Amazon, it seems like a fairly low threshold, but it turns out not everybody has a trademark. Quite frankly, if you want to sell on Amazon, you need a trademark, and it needs to be here in the US. If you plan to sell in other international Amazon marketplaces, you need to have your trademark extended to those other international countries so that Amazon will respect your brand accordingly and allow you to lock down your content. One of the other aspects of branding that I think is so misunderstood by companies that started off outside of Amazon, what is a brand? A brand at its theoretical level is a set of features and benefits that are consistently delivered to the customer, so the customer understands that you as a company, you're delivering on a set of promises you're making to customers. So what happens? A company invests all this money in marketing and says, well, we're going to work with all of our retailers and put certain standard logos and messaging out in front of consumers so they get to know who we are. And then on Amazon, we're going to ignore that. We're going to let somebody else create the product listings. We're going to let somebody else create duplicate listings that may not necessarily resemble what we want our brand to look like. It completely confounds me that companies aren't actively managing their branding on Amazon and making sure that the message that customers on Amazon see is in fact a message consistent to everything that their marketing departments are doing in every other channel. So when you talk about branding on Amazon, there are lots of companies that don't want to sell on Amazon. Okay, I'm not saying you have to sell on Amazon, but you sure as heck should be controlling what your brand looks like, because inevitably somebody is going to sell your product, whether you want to or not. Someone's going to be on Amazon selling that product. So make sure the messages and the features and benefits that you're looking so hard to communicate to customers, make sure that you're controlling that as a brand, because otherwise Amazon will be a random issue that may create a lot of confusion for customers who are seeing your brand for the first time through the Amazon channel.
Yeah, and it may even lower their appreciation or their view of your brand based
Absolutely.
upon what they're seeing, and they see some other seller could be selling your product, and maybe they have some bad reviews, and maybe it's because of customer service issues. And that could affect their view of your brand and the way that they create their listing, which might not really be putting forth the attributes or the pros and cons of your product.
Right.
Again, it could make your brand seem inferior compared to other products, and you want to make sure you're able to control that.
There's also the component, Rich, that there's a set of rules for playing well in the Amazon sandbox, and how you set up your listing with the right types of images and content. It's a little bit different than what brands might be used to in other channels. And so if you're going to get serious about the Amazon channel and you're going to build and control your brand on the Amazon channel, make sure you understand how Amazon works when it comes to creating high quality listings. There are agencies that do this. There are consultants that do this. There are any number of other sellers that you can reach out to and say, I look at your listing and it looks really good. I'm seeing certain types of images. For example, I'm seeing lifestyle images or packaging images or infographic images, stuff that help consumers to break through the confusion or the questions they have about your product before they decide to actually spend money and buy it. You've got to work through all those issues and understand that what you do that is effective in a brick and mortar setting, you may need to retrofit some of those messages and some of the visuals to be in a place where Amazon customers will respond effectively to what you put in front of them on the Amazon product listing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, um, i- if someone were launching a new product,
Hmm.
a new product, something that has no previous um, brand impression on Amazon,
Yes.
what do you think would be a good starting point for getting set up? I mean, you mentioned brand registry, so having
Yep.
a registered trademark allows you to get in and have rights toward that name and keeping it exclusive. But what else do you think that a new brand needs to do when they're putting their product on Amazon so they don't open up a can of worms that they're not ready for?
Well, assume that even though you may be going onto Amazon for the first time, you need to check to see, are there other people selling your brand already? Meaning, has somebody else gone in and created product listings using your brand name? Even for brands that haven't been around that long, they're often surprised to find that somehow somebody got inventory and started selling it on Amazon and created product listings that are nowhere near what the brand would like to see. So even if you get brand registry and you create some high quality listings and you lock the content down, you need to go and look for potentially miscellaneous listings that are also out there that may create a problem for you around creating consistent messaging for all of your listings.
So, James, I'm wondering, how do you go about investing in your brand to build your brand further?
So once you've built the listing, meaning you've taken high quality photos, you've potentially have a video, you've got some enhanced content with good bullet points and so on. It costs money to do that. Now you've got yourself a really good looking listing. Hopefully you have really good product to support that listing. But the reality is Amazon is a hyper competitive market. And so it doesn't matter what category of product you're in. Chances are there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors that sell products that are close enough to what you sell that you're having to fight for share against all the rest of them. And so you're coming in day one, you have no traffic, you have no eyeballs on your product. What are you going to do to invest, to build traffic, to get people to look at your brand, hopefully see a product listing that looks good and gets them excited about spending money on your product versus somebody else's product? And so the question is around, where does the traffic come from? Do you have social media traffic that you're driving to Amazon? Do you have email campaigns where you're driving people to Amazon? Or are you spending money on advertising within Amazon to get them interested in potentially seeing your products when they go searching for items like your product? For many brands that get started on Amazon, biggest problem they will face is saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea how expensive it is to get started to get those first 5 sales and then the next 5 sales. When you're launching on Amazon, you're basically building a flywheel, and you have no flywheel when you start. You could have high awareness of your brand outside of Amazon. You could have high market share in non-Amazon channels, but on Amazon, you're at the bottom of the barrel on day one when you start. Most product search on Amazon is unbranded. People go looking for men's running shoes, not Reebok men's running shoes, but men's running shoes. And so if you sell running shoes, or any product for that matter, in most cases, consumers come in and they type in, show me men's running shoes, and they'll be shown all sorts of brands, well-known brands, as well as completely esoteric brands that may exist only on Amazon. And so as a brand coming into Amazon, nobody cares about your brand. You do, but no consumer cares about your brand. And most consumers, by not doing branded search, they're basically leaving themselves open to be presented with offers from brands that they have never thought to think at all about potentially buying. And so you're having to spend money to drive traffic to your listings, typically through advertising spend on Amazon. So you're setting up Amazon ad campaigns, and there's a whole science on that, and we could have 3 webinars on just that
Mhm.
topic. But at least as a brand, you need to be prepared as you build your financial model for saying, I want to go on Amazon and I want to sell $1 million of product. Okay, well, let's figure out, number one, how big is the market opportunity here? And what portion of the total opportunity is the size of the sales target that you're putting in front of yourself? So, there are tools like, for example, Jungle Scout, where you can very quickly go in and evaluate, oh, okay, if I'm looking at men's jeans that are priced between $80 and $200, how many dollars of sales were done in that particular segment in the last 30 days? Okay, we can get a number and say, all right, let's extrapolate that across the whole year. and figure out that, and I'm totally making up these numbers, okay, there's $50 million of men's jeans sales on Amazon between, $80 and $200. Well, if you're saying I'm a new brand and I want to sell $1 million, then what you're basically saying is I want 2% share of a market that's already $50 million. Okay, if you want 2% share, what are you going to do to make sure you get at least 2% of the traffic going to your products? And by the way, you're not on the first page of search results today because you have no sales. And so you've got to work your way up to getting to the place where you're not only driving paid search to get sales, but you're also getting organic search placement by way of having already earned sales and earned product reviews to get yourself to a place where when the next person that comes along that says, show me a pair of men's jeans between $80 and $200, your product's going to show up on the first page. Investing in advertising takes time. It takes a lot of patience because Amazon's advertising algorithms don't immediately reward you by spending money and getting you top placement. There are other companies ahead of you that I'm sure have already been spending money in the same category to get paid placement. And so you're having to either outspend them initially or start generating higher conversion from the ads that you are driving in order for Amazon to say, we will pick you over everybody else that's been bidding on these ads in the past. So what happens is you've figured out how much opportunity there is in the whole category of whatever your products are in. You're figuring out, is it realistic for me to get $1 million out of a $50 million opportunity? And then you have to invest heavily in actually making your product show up often enough that enough consumers will look at it and say, okay, that looks interesting. I guess I'll try out your product. Whether they've heard of your brand or not, they still need to actually click the button and buy the product. Let's assume enough people do actually buy your product. You're starting to get some sales. You still have a product that has no product reviews or no product ratings. So the next customer that comes along sees a nice looking product listing that has no reviews or no ratings. And so that leaves some risk on the table for that customer to say, I'm going to pick your product, got no product reviews or ratings. And so you've got to be thinking about, how do I get my past customers to invest in actually spending the time to leave me reviews so that hopefully the reviews are good enough that the next customer comes and the scores are good enough to motivate the next shopper to say, oh, I don't know this brand, but it looks good based on the performance of past Amazon customers. So as we think about all these different steps of, you got to drive traffic to drive sales. Once you drive sales, you got to drive ratings and reviews. Slowly you're building a foundation that gets you to a place where 6 months, a year from now, you're going to have decent first page organic search placements so that you don't have to work so hard at driving traffic to your listings. Amazon's going to provide you with organic search traffic because your product's already doing relatively well enough relative to all the other competitors in the same space that Amazon wants to show your product to a shopper and get them to a position of at least considering your brand. This journey takes time, it takes money, and it's all time and money that many new brands don't believe they have. They say, well, but I've got such an awesome product. Wouldn't people want to see my product? And the answer is, I don't really care if your product is good or not. You have to earn your way to a place where someone's actually going to see it, to consider it long enough to potentially buy it. So the building a better mousetrap version doesn't work very well on Amazon unless you're also prepared to invest in spending money to drive traffic to your listing. As I say, nobody cares about your brand as much as you do, but it also turns out that your brand doesn't have to be better than everybody else to win. And in fact, many large national brands are rather surprised when they discover that on Amazon, they're competing with a whole bunch of companies they've never heard of. Private label brands that are born on Amazon, that only exist on Amazon, that know how to play the Amazon game better than everybody else, and can garner share from big national brands who aren't necessarily as focused on playing the Amazon game as effectively as needed to maintain share.
Got it. And so I think just closing the loop or circling back to the beginning there, it's like all of those things that you consider in terms of the things that you'll have to do. Yep. You need to rate that and put a dollar value on it to see what it's actually going to cost you to get that market share that you're looking for. So if you're aiming for that 2% market share, once you realize all of the things that you'll be up against and all of the things you'll need to pay for and
Yes.
traffic that you'll need to buy,
Yep.
then you could begin to assess whether it's possible to get to that 2% market share.
And the first 6 months that you're investing in the Amazon channel, by the time you back out all the normal selling commissions and fulfillment commissions and advertising costs and whatever return related costs and overhead you might have, you may well net out to a place where you're not making much margin at all. And that's just the cost of building your flywheel and getting to a place where you're getting traction on Amazon. And you're in a position where, after 6 months or 9 months, you're going to start to do well, and you're going to garner the margins at that point. If you're a new brand, new to the world, new to Amazon, you probably don't have a runway that's years and years long. And yet here's Amazon with 200 million customers. Well, great. I want to be there because there's lots of people shopping. Yeah, well, there's also lots of other competitor brands that have already showed up and have already started to invest in building their own flywheels. And it can take time to be successful from a sales and a margin perspective.
Got it. Okay. I'm curious a little bit about your experience with IP in the Amazon world.
Yep.
And so, I mean, there's a couple of ways to approach that. One is this from the standpoint of protection. The other is the standpoint of infringement. So, let's talk about the second one first. So, with regard to infringement, I mean, people often get shut down due to an IP complaint.
Mm-hmm.
So they will have a competitor who asserts that they own the patent to a certain product that they're listing, and that Amazon will shut them down.
Yes.
And now the procedures are rather opaque on behalf of Amazon. Like, they don't explain how to deal with it. There are times when they're looking for certain things, and other times that they're not. So, for example, there's this pilot program for utility patents, which where if someone is asserting that you're infringing their utility patent, Amazon will basically invite you to enter into a procedure where you put up money. The person accusing you of a utility patent infringement also puts up money, and then you get to argue it before a mediator.
Yes.
And then ultimately the winner gets their money back, the money that they put in for the process. But I've seen this procedure used sporadically, where sometimes it's offered, and other times someone just gets shut down after they've made an IP complaint, and there's no real adjudication of that. And I'm curious if you have any inside information about how some of that is done, in terms of, because like I said, from the outside, it's often very opaque. And it's
Right.
often like, well, we don't even know what procedures we have available to us.
So a couple of things. It's good that Amazon is outsourcing this to trained IP professionals. These arbitrators are typically trained attorneys, trained in the ways of IP. And so you're bringing somebody in who knows what to look for in order to evaluate whether there A is a patent, and B, how much distinction there needs to be before there's a violation of that patent. With many things at Amazon, unfortunately, the police force within Amazon is often folks that have been trained for only a couple of weeks in a particular issue, and they're having to make very difficult calls.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to design patents, utility patents, you really have to know exactly what you're doing in order to be able to rule effectively. So I congratulate Amazon on creating the program. There are definitely not as many people using the program as there could be. It's when you're going onto a marketplace and there are literally 1,000 competitors that are in the exact same space as you. That's unlike any other channel in which most brands sell. And any one of those companies, assume they're not all there to play nice or to play fair. And some of them know full well they're going to violate patents, but they recognize that Amazon's policing process may take enough time that it's totally worth violating the patent to make a bunch of money short term before somebody actually gets around to enforcing that there may be a patent violation. So you've got that kind of nonsense happening. But you've also got the situation where companies will overstep the bounds of how much IP they actually have. And they'll use this effort to try to take down competitors really in an effort to crush competition, even if it's short term. And again, the process of evaluating whether or not there is an IP violation, it takes time, and time is money if you happen to be the one that's being pulled down. Mm-hmm. If you're the guy that says, hey, all of you are violating my IP, and I can get all my competitors to have their products taken down, that gives me a clear path to a lot of sales over the next month to 2 months while things start to get worked out. It used to take years, and Amazon would basically say, listen, we don't want to get involved. Your attorney needs to talk to the other attorney.
Right.
Well, often there is no other attorney on the other side, and there's no real email address, or there's no real way to have a conversation.
Right.
So I don't want to sound like I'm complaining here, because I'm not, because I think Amazon's taken a good first step forward here. Are they consistently applying this process? Not yet, but it's definitely a very good improvement over what it used to be, where it was totally Amazon hands off, not involved at all. We don't really want to get involved. We don't know how to evaluate. You're going to have to get your lawyer to figure out how to get a hold of these other people. Well, there's so many companies selling on Amazon where there's no legitimate way to get the other guy on the phone or on email to talk to you. And every time that somebody chooses not to talk to you, that's even more delay for someone else to generate sales on products that may be violating your IP. So my suggestion here, and I am not an attorney, but my suggestion is go get yourself an IP attorney who has experience working with Amazon to represent you if either you feel that other people are violating your IP or you're being unfairly challenged with having violated someone else's IP. It doesn't mean that even the best IP attorneys are going to be able to figure out the spaghetti solution that Amazon is offering. But again, this is a work in progress. The scale of black hat techniques that get thrown into Amazon trying to enforce what they see as is it or is it not a violation. In many cases, these companies who are blatantly violating, they know full well what they're doing. They're just betting on the fact that it's going to take enough time for enforcement to happen, so that
they'll make the money first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. So yes, and I agree with all of the above. I think it's great that Amazon has these procedures and that they're making an effort to adjudicate some of these matters and to be fair. And it is inconsistent, and often, usually where I'm involved is where someone has been shut down unfairly, and we're trying to figure out how to get through to someone who can hear reason, where often we'll submit a well-reasoned response, and then we'll get back something that said, what you need to do is supply us with invoices showing that these goods are legitimate goods, and it's like, that's not what we're talking about.
Not what we're talking about.
So it is interesting, and I would love at some point to get to talk to someone who is on the inside with the IP complaint handling to really see what are the best practices. I mean, I would, just my wish list is I would love to see some type of guide or kind of handbook or set of directions for how to handle these things. But I agree, it's a great step in the right direction, the things that they're doing.
We have had many situations where a trademark is being violated. We even had one client that had invested in trade dress, which is a very specific form of IP protection, much more accentuated than your typical trademark. And the situation was so ridiculous. It took over 3 years for the problem to finally be ruled in favor of our client, even though they didn't have this problem in any other channel outside of Amazon. And so the reality is, many of us think, oh, we go get ourselves IP protection, we get a trademark, we get all this design patent, we've invested in all this, the coast is clear. The reality is you're about to enter a marketplace where there are lots of opportunists who don't all necessarily play fair. And Amazon is kind of trapped in that situation of they don't want to have to be the parent on every one of these issues, because Amazon doesn't want to be an expert in IP or IP law. They don't want to be an expert in every aspect of how to enforce the law for every type of seller and some of the shenanigans they might be up to. So given the massive scale of Amazon, many people may feel that some of these steps are slow to coming, but the reality is you don't want to be throwing the baby in the bathwater out all the time. And sometimes it means that, honest sellers, honest brands do get caught up in bad situations where they have to wait around for some human being to actually look at the paperwork and say, oh yeah, this makes absolutely no sense. And all that time delay is just more opportunity for the bad guys to continue generating sales.
Yep. And to me, the takeaway of it is that Amazon tends to defer to IP owners, so it pays to be an IP owner.
Yep.
It pays to be the guy holding the trademark, holding the design patent.
Yep.
And I often tell people also that whereas conventional logic is that utility patents are more valuable than design patents because they cover structure, they cover a concept. But on Amazon, design patents are more valuable because of just the nature of how these things are handled. As you said, sometimes by employees who've only been there for a few weeks. And if it comes down to a design patent complaint, they're just looking at pictures and they say, okay, it looks similar. They don't have to try to figure out, well, what does this patent stand for? Like in a utility patent where there's a lot of wording and such. So they see that it looks like the pictures and they'll shut down the listing often. So
before we get into the fact that we're talking about a situation where at least one of the companies has some sort of patent in place, by definition, that is already a tiny minority of all of these born on Amazon brands.
Yeah.
Most of these born on Amazon brands are companies that are basically going to some manufacturer that's got excess capacity to manufacture product, essentially white labeling something.
Right.
A company goes and builds a brand with a trademark and some UPCs, but there's absolutely no ability to get a patent on any of this stuff because it's the same vitamin in the bottle.
Exactly.
It's the same pancake flipper that everybody else has. So
they're just Me Too products.
If you want to be a truly Me Too product on Amazon and get in and get out and make some money, okay. If you want to build a long-term brand that actually stands for something and has assets beyond just the inventory you hold, then you need to get a patent. It takes time. It takes money up front, something that a lot of these born on Amazon brands don't want to spend. But certainly it can extend your life of your product and the sales opportunity of your product by 18 to 24 months on Amazon, which quite frankly, for a lot of these born on Amazon brands, the half-life is 6 to 9 months to begin with. So if you can extend it another 18 to 24 months, you're a rich man.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes it's just that little bit of leverage that it gives you over the situation. And I often tell people that if they spend a few $1,000s, let's say on a design patent, if it's a product that sells 6 figures a month, then that they recoup their money in a single day of being able to shut down a competitor, or even less. So it kind of depends, and I think with those often is a numbers game too. It's like if you're launching 10 products and that are worthy of patents, like most of them are not worthy of patenting, but if you're launching 10 that happen to be worthy of applying for a design patent, it's 1 out of those 10 is probably going to pay for all of them many times over. But I often caution people that most products should not be patented. You should not even bother, and that's a decision you have to make, I think, quite carefully. But yeah, it's interesting. And I had Carlos Alvarez on the show last week, and we were talking about this Me Too versus differentiated product phenomena. And basically, one of the things he said was that he thought that Me Too was the cheaper way to go. But what he discovered in the end was actually having a differentiated product and launching that on Amazon tended to be less expensive. With the Me Too product, you're spending so much to compete on pay-per-click advertising to just try to be relevant and be one of the many.
Yes.
But even with the investment of, paying for a mold and things like that and a differentiated product, it still ended up being less expensive. I thought that was interesting.
I've had colleagues who will do keyword research and specifically go looking for low traffic terms, figure out what products they belong to, and end up becoming the king of a little hill. And it's
Mhm.
often, very, very, you can be a lot of financial rewards being the king of a little hill rather than being in a situation where you're one of thousands competing for the same pie. So it's just, quite frankly, these born on Amazon brands, they take all sorts of different flavors of strategy to build a business. I would agree with you that being the 1001st vitamin C product is not going to be a good long-term business. But if you've got a short-term manufacturing competitive advantage, you can make a bit of money, okay. But let's not fool ourselves that we're building a sophisticated long-term brand where it's actually worth investing in the branding beyond just getting a brand name and a trademark and the UPC.
Absolutely. So I just want to ask you a little bit about your book,
Hmm.
about the controlling your brand in the age of Amazon. So in your book, I guess take a close look at branding, and kind of like, I guess, lessons that you learned from working within the Amazon space, and also lessons that you've learned from Amazon. So could you tell me a little bit more about what kind of
Yep.
what you talk about in the book?
So Amazon is a marketplace that welcomes basically anybody to sell basically anything. And there aren't a lot of requirements that brands have to meet. I'm sorry, there aren't a lot of requirements that sellers have to meet before they're allowed to list just about anything they want on the site. And so the idea being here, if I show up and I say I have a bunch of product for a brand that's clearly not mine, I'm a retailer and I managed to get my hands on some product, I can list that product and sell it. And as a result, Amazon is a marketplace with literally hundreds of thousands of unauthorized sellers, companies that are not authorized by the brands to sell those products, but they've chosen to use the Amazon marketplace as a place to be able to sell volume very quickly. There's nothing inherently wrong about unauthorized sellers, but it does create a big problem for brands where those companies may be selling at prices well below what the brand would like, in part because unauthorized sellers are typically not actually going to follow a MAP policy, which minimum advertised price policy that brands put in place for their authorized sellers. Well, if I'm not authorized, then I'm ignoring that policy. And many brands don't understand the first sale doctrine, which is a case law around who can and can't resell products. But many of the large, sophisticated, unauthorized sellers on Amazon, they certainly understand how first sale doctrine works. And they will continue to use that as a legal protection to continue to sell whatever products they can get their hands on, much to the frustration of the brands that are trying to see standardized prices across different channels. And so our book looks at, from a brand executive's perspective, what do you need to do to control key levers around who's ultimately going to represent your brand on Amazon? If you have unauthorized sellers on the site, are there legal ways of removing them from Amazon and from any other site so that you can control what your branding looks like across all channels, and you can stabilize your prices across all channels and be in a place where customers aren't inherently drawn to the Amazon channel just because there's a plethora of unauthorized sellers who have price eroded your retail price to a place where, of course, they're going to go to Amazon because nowhere else offers these low prices. If a brand can create standard prices, standard branding, standard experience for customers, then customers will pick the channel based on where they happen to like to shop versus a price-driven decision, which is not a good long-term strategy for any brand. So we look at aspects of the law, we look at aspects of Amazon enforcement, we look at aspects of what it takes as a brand to get protection over critical distribution issues. For many brands today that have been around for decades, they haven't evolved the way they think about their overall channel management strategy in light of online marketplaces coming online and creating an opportunity for not only existing authorized sellers to sell their products on Amazon, but for people to get into the business of being unauthorized sellers to go and find sources and become the next unauthorized seller on a channel like Amazon. So my co-author is an attorney. I don't claim to be an attorney, but looking at both the business and the legal aspects of what a brand needs to do to not only fix the legal structure and the arguments they make around protecting themselves from first sale doctrine, but also what do they need to do on Amazon to control what their branding looks like, to create a consistent experience for customers where they're able to reduce the friction that brands create for themselves with their other retailers and distributors who are ever frustrated with what's happening on Amazon. Get the wild, wild west out of what's happening to your brand on Amazon and create a stable, consistent experience across channels.
That sounds great. As I said, I bought the book on Kindle today. I'm looking forward to digging into it. And so, James, if people want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, how do they go about doing that?
So our company is buyboxexperts.com, BUYBOX experts, buyboxexperts.com. And I'm James at buyboxexperts.com. Happy to talk with sellers and brands on Amazon that are thinking through how to better develop their Amazon channel strategy. It's a pretty crazy place selling on Amazon. But the good news is, if you've got the right knowledge, you can understand what the sandbox looks like, and you can ultimately thrive if you make good decisions about what you're going to sell and how you're going to control the experience for customers.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you being here, James. And I guess I'll see you at Prosper.
Thanks for having me on today, Rich.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.